Welcome to the Healing with Love Summit. Step into a world where we choose to move with kindness, love, and acceptance for our neighbors on this planet, no matter their perceived differences. Choose to listen with an open heart. Choose to come from a place of learning and sharing. Welcome. I'm Larissa Russell of Creative You Healing, and I now have with me Deborah Epstein. So welcome, Deb.
Hi, Larissa. Thank you so much for having me for this. It's an amazing topic to be discussing in where we are right now.
Yes, exactly. And you and I have so many conversations. So we've had a lot of behind the scenes conversations about this. For those who don't know you, let's start there. A little bit about yourself and what you do.
Okay, so I am a visionary artist, a shamanic practitioner, a bodywork healer. So I do a specific kind of bodywork called Myofascial Release, and I'm a spiritual creativity guide. And I'm working on, well, it's like an ongoing project. My business is called the Cosmic Dreaming Lodge, and it's a place where you can heal, create, and dream, and just live your best life. And so the Dreaming Lodge is a kind of a blend of my shamanic and creative side. It's just kind of provides a perfect imaginative space for healing and rehabbing the imagination so that we can really create what we are here to do in the world. So that's what I do.
I love that. Let's get into it because you know why we're doing this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It needs to be done. We need to talk about these things. So let's start with like the baby step. How would you define healing with love? And is it important in promoting diversity and inclusion?
It's super important. I think it's super important just in life because everything is love. Everything is made out of love. And, it's an act of healing is an act of love, not just for the practitioner working with you, but you for yourself. It is what the world needs now is love. And I think too, and as we're transforming and becoming as a species, we're starting to recognize that need to be loved, and that we can create that for ourselves. It has to start here first. Yeah. I don't know if I answered the whole question, but I think I got pretty close.
You answered in whatever way works for you. I'm not one of those people who's like, no, I wanted a different answer. You must start again.
Right. Answer the question the way I asked it.
It's so not me.
And right.
I think, just what you're saying about love, like we all need love. We all, and you and I have talked about this, about how we all think we're coming from a place of love. Even people that we may perceive as not being full of love, coming at us with love, I'm sure they think that they are. I can't imagine people think that they're not coming from a place of love. I've had people tell me that's why I need to change, because they love me and they want me to change because, it's in my best interest. So I do think people think they're coming from a place of love. How could we define love as the collective? Or what are your thoughts on that? Collective love, so that we can.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, because, from your first comment, it's like, yeah, I agree with you. Like I think very few people think that when they do something and they make a choice that they're coming from a place of, I just want to mess up your day today. Right. I just want to make your life miserable. We're more ego-centered in a certain way, and loving yourself. It's, there's the egoic love, like where I buy myself the things and I show myself love that way, that it's like a selfish kind of love, maybe for everybody else. But then I'm going to use the same language. That's why it's really interesting, right? Because I do need to come before I put anyone else in front of me, and I get to love me first. And that's how I really learn about love. And, it's interesting. You and I talked, we've talked before about this topic, and what just popped into my mind was how my relationship with my father, who just recently passed a little while ago, that relationship taught me about unconditional love, because here's a man that when I was growing up was not very loving at all, right? Didn't know how to show it, and even as an older man, he didn't know how to take that in and allow himself to be loved, because he was so wounded. And he did a certain amount of work, but not like that generation just doesn't like introspect and look at themselves, right? Look at what I'm doing. That's something that our generation, after them kind of did, and are doing more of. And I can say honestly that like I had this epiphany. I was thinking about him before he died, and like knowing that it was coming, or just intuiting that it was coming, and going like, wow, like that, all the things that he did to me, or that happened as I was growing up, who he was and how he was with us. And I still love him, where I've had people go like, wow, your dad did that. Like, I'm surprised you're even talking to him still. Right. And it's like, that's the testament of the work that we do to stay in relationship with a family member, or even just mankind. It doesn't mean you have to. Relationship is how we define that to be too. Like, we're going to have people that we're in closer contact and relationship with. And then we're going to have relationship with just the guy walking down the street, that they're still human. I may not know anything about them, but they're human just like me, and they're a living being just like everything else on this planet. So I tend to extrapolate out a little bit, where, loving the planet, loving nature, loving, the water. Like, if we love something, we don't set out to dominate it and control it, yet we have a lot of that going on, just even within the relationship we have with ourselves. Like, where do I try to control certain things, certain behaviors, certain ways of being, certain situations, and where do I dominate, within myself too? It's like stuff we all learn, but we also learn to reflect out those behaviors. And I don't know that as a society, we really, really know what is the definition of love, and I think we just know through our experiences, and maybe it's an unfolding of that, what we experience in the world.
Just as you were saying that too, it made me really think about like, love is going to be different for everyone, right? And one of the things I asked all my speakers for this summit was for your labels, right? Because that's how we often judge people, is by labels. And I think about myself with autism, and for a lot of people, I feel I've been told I seem very emotionless, but really what it is my emotions don't always match what is considered the norm for that output of that emotion. I still have emotions. I still feel emotions. I just may not feel them the same way as a lot of other people.
Yeah. Or express them like everybody else too. That's the other, I think that's kind of what I'm hearing you say too, is how they're being expressed,
Yeah. And so even thinking about love or any other emotion, it's going to be very personal. And so I think the main thing for me when it comes to love is about just being kind to other people, regardless of differences. Yeah. Regardless of, we can want the best for other people without needing to push them into it, or chase them down, or harm them in some way. That kindness, and maybe it's different. Is kindness and love different? What are your thoughts on
that? I feel like kindness comes out of love, and like compassion comes out of love. I think that when you can really tap into that energy of love within yourself, and sit and just hold space for somebody that's loving, that's kind, right? You're listening, right? Holding space and listen. I'm going to remain open, right? Because I love you like I love myself and everybody, right? And I do think kindness is part of that. But then, like, so interesting when we talk about this, like what just popped into my head is like, you have to be cruel to be kind, right? Or love hurts. I always had a hard time with that. But what I've come to know is that when we're in love also is very fierce, right? Love is also where we want to hold our boundaries from, a place of love for ourselves. And there's that emotion called anger, right? That's part of our fight or flight mechanism that also helps us know when a boundary is being crossed, right? If we're angry about it. And then anger can also be that energy that, gives you that stand that like, this is just not right. This is just not right for me. And I need to say what I need to say, and that we can speak from a place of compassion and love without knocking each other down. There's a way to do that, without shaming, without blaming, without making wrong, and invite people up to a higher vibration. Because that's also, if we're going back to the definition of love, it's a vibrational frequency of energy, right? That we are going to each experience a little bit differently, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think allowing us to experience it differently is where we seem to be getting caught up in our society, culture, world. It's not just here or there. We're in all different countries, but it seems to be happening around the world where we want to put people in a box, and if they don't fit in that box, then we can't love them, we can't be kind to them, we can't. And that seems to be where some of the issues are coming from. So what would you think are some of the things that we could do to bring people together in kindness, in love?
Yeah, well, I'm always going to say we got to start on the inside, and it's cultivating that relationship within yourself as part of a whole, right? And recognizing that you're not isolated, you're not separate, and that we're all connected by that one force energy, life force energy that we have many different names for, but to me, it's all love that connects us all, right? And I think our actions can get born out of that love, but it's also like, as we're walking forward, holding that vibration of unity, not homogeny, but unity with diversity, celebrating each other in our differences instead of trying to beat each other down to bang us into shape so that we all are just like one. It's like, how boring is that? Like, isn't it so much more interesting to just open your ears and hear someone else's story that may be from another culture that you're not from, that may even have a different religious belief than your own? I think, things to do is like kind of like on a local level, just with yourself, and how you walk through the world is be open to hear and experience in a loving way other people, other beings. I like to think about this too. Like we have enough problems on this earth with ourselves getting along, but then as we're expanding in our awareness of what the universe really is and how many other beings are out there, on other planets, and that we may have come from from those other places, right? So it's really interesting, like where we sit right now with what is being revealed to us, and how our world really is, and so we can't, honestly, I don't think we can afford to keep creating it the way we're creating it.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that, because we're seeing the polarization that it's causing, right? And I do have an understanding of the energy shift that's happening. And there, of course, there's going to be energetic pushback, right? And I talk about it as the masculine and feminine energies, and that's not men and women, but the energies. And they have different ways of moving. It's all energy. But there's going to be pushback on the things that are used to being, whatever energy is used to being there. Of course, it's going to fight for its place. So I feel like that's where we're at right now. We're in this fight for our space, and things are shifting. And of course, we're uncomfortable with that shifting, our brain tells us we need to be afraid with any change. And our history tells us we need to be afraid with any change. So being open to change can be really difficult on all levels.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the things that you think people could do, individuals, to move into that space of being open to change?
That's a big question. Yeah, some of the things that you could do to be open, to become open to change. It's, again, I'm going to bring it back. I always bring it back to the individual, because, you know, it's as above, so below, right? So when we look at like when we physically change, like doing body work, when I make a shift in the body has to move differently now. And that's going to shift the energy. And in those moments of change, it's more about asking like the question, how do I support the change that I'm creating right now? How do I get support for myself in the change I'm creating for me right now? And it's really interesting. It's like we can never underestimate the power of prayer and meditation. And I don't mean the type of prayer where we go, please, send me this, that, blah, 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 blah. It's really like asking spirit, asking source, whatever you call that energy that is you're plugged into, that you are, that's also it runs through everything, and asking for that support. It's like shifting your awareness to tap into the source that of all that there is, of all there is. And really, it's when you change, when you start to open up to the change that's happening, that's actually like you're doing it already, right? It's going to happen. We're going to be in resistance, because that's part of the process, right? There's no growth anywhere without any form of resistance. Then it's noticing that we're resisting, right? And so when you think about, like, now go bigger picture, anytime there was a change in history, it's like there's the revolution, is that time where you get to a point and you go, enough is enough, and I need to make that change, right? And then it's the resistance to the change, right? The pushback and stuff. We have that going on in here too. And I honestly, it's a practice. It's having the awareness that this is a thing, right? We want it to be different. However, we have to be diligent with our awareness. Like, where am I doing the things that are bugging me about someone else, right? Where am I not speaking kind? When are the times, and me being in charge of me when I do that, it's one thing to say it, but then it's a totally different thing to be acting in it. And we all fall short because we're all human, right? Yeah.
Yeah. You and I were having a conversation earlier, because we talk every week, and we were talking about just that, about awareness and how you have to be, because we are human and we are not going to be always aware. And so we have times where we are like, oh, look, okay, I see myself doing this. Okay, am I going to do something about it? Am I not going to do something about it? And other times where you just move through life oblivious to everything around you. And it's almost like a way of like tuning out from everything. And so bringing that awareness more into focus for ourselves. Do you have ideas for people on how they could do that for themselves?
To bring more awareness in for themselves, or yeah. I think, it's one of those things. It's so easy to say, but everything comes down to practice, right? And it's noticing from a place of, knowing that if I'm aware of something, I can see what it is and I can make a different choice, or I can keep choosing this thing, right? So yeah, I think what we were talking about is how, like, well, I'm trying to create XYZ over here, and I want it to look like this, and I want it to be like this. It's going to be wonderful when it's done, right? And then it's like, okay, well, what's in my way? What's stopping me from getting that thing, right? And then And then usually we go, oh, it's whatever's stopping me must be the thing that I'm doing wrong. I must be doing something wrong when it's not working out in my timeline, the way I want it or whatever. It's, I'm doing something wrong. I'm not doing something right. I'm creating some, from some other place, and I'm never going to make that happen, and blah, 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 blah. Right. But like what we want to start doing is really start giving ourselves a break, because first of all, there's how many billions of people on the planet, right? And there's an alignment issue here too. So we also talk about too in consciousness, like the more lights get turned on, the more consciousness shifts, and it's going to shift, and it's going to shift little bits at a time. Right. And you almost want it that way, because if it didn't happen that way and you just woke up tomorrow because like all of a sudden we hit that tipping point and everything's changing, we'd all freak out, because there's so much that has to change. Like you just name a political issue and it's got to change, right? Because it's not working for anybody, right? And I think this is another part of it too, is that we're almost so busy infighting on these freedoms and rights to be who we inherently are, or the opposite, trying to hold back, right? That it's almost like a big distraction for what the work that really needs to get done. And that is that, staying to shift your awareness back to what's working for you. Maybe you can approach it from a positive, what's working for me, and keep doing that thing that's working for you. Keep creating, the joy, knowing that sometimes as you're moving towards creating joy, you're going to feel the sadness. That doesn't mean you didn't create joy. That means you're here as a human being having the full-on experience, and it's all good, right? So it's really getting into it's all good, and then just congratulating yourself and celebrating yourself when you see that you weren't in alignment. The actions that you took weren't in alignment to that thing that you said you wanted. And then, and seeing where you're doing things like being asleep at the wheel, right? Like, oh, I hate this person because they always are so judgmental, blah, 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 blah. But what did you just do? Right. Who's guilty of that? I know I can say I am, but it's like, it's knowing that I'm doing it is one thing, and continuing to do it is another, but then catching myself in the act and going, oh, wow, look at that. There was an incongruency within who I'm wanting to be and how I'm actually being.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to jump back to what you were just saying on that, because judgment is absolutely one of those things that we need. We need to judge a situation. We need to, that's what keeps us safe, right? Mm-hmm. Judging a situation, judging people. But then it's allowing ourselves to recognize that was an initial judgment based on, whatever factors needed, whatever was going on. But then allowing yourself to go, okay, that was an initial judgment, and now I have the space and the safety to re-look at that, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's a step that's often missed, is that we do that snap judgment, and then it's like, okay, that's it. Mm-hmm. As opposed to, okay, I did that snap judgment because that's a safety mechanism that's built in. We're human, and we need to, make these judgments. But then it's like, okay, now that I'm in safety, what's actually happening here? What's really going on? What's going on for me? What's it triggering? What are they really doing? Or how they're dressed? How does that affect me? Why do I think they're a bad person because they're dressed like that? Why do I think they're a good person because they're dressed like that? Mm-hmm. So it's the stepping back and examining mm-hmm. those things. Not the fact that we judge, but the fact that we don't then re-examine. We just stay there.
Yeah. And or we make it wrong, right? Just wrong, right? We make it wrong. One of the things that I would say, if I can stay on point with what you just said, because I just kind of got a little distracted by another thought, but because it's such a rich topic about, judging and making ourselves wrong. And that, and the other side of that, it's really loving to protect yourself. It's a loving thing. It's when we take it to the extreme where we're not just, keep trying to keep ourselves safe. We're on a vendetta now, because it's nobody's safe if this is still going on, right? So there's the situational, like, okay, I don't know why I just did that. And there's the trauma part too. It's like that example of, like, if you got hit in a crosswalk by a blue truck, and maybe there was a bearded man driving the blue truck, and you never healed that trauma, you're going to be set off by blue trucks all the time. You don't even know why, right? And old men with beards, because that was the driver, and that's what your psyche took in, and at the time of the trauma, and now it's all bad. There's no delineation in there. So, like, the healing of the trauma is another part of that too. When we've been, and this, right? When we've been injured, we're biased. We become biased, and keeping ourselves safe and being biased, it's all in there. And that, like, I think that kind of plays into the question about, well, I am acting loving, right? Because there's so much to this, for, keeping yourself, from a keeping yourself safe standpoint to going out and making war standpoint, because it's wrong for people to do this, right? Yeah, it's such a rich and diverse problem.
Yeah. And that's the unpacking of it that we each individually need to do. And that's what I'm hoping we can get people to do with this summit, is just stop for a moment. Because often, even when we think we're open and we're non-judgmental and we love everyone, I know I have biases of my own, right? And I can be triggered by some things pretty quickly. So nobody's perfect. Nobody's going to get it all right. It's just, are we moving forward? Are we trying to come from a place of love where we are being kind to others, not just a place of love where I love you as a person, so you must be this way, which is a thing that happens. But I love you as a person, and and so therefore I'm going to be kind to you. Right?
Yeah, because I want to be open. I want to be open, and I want to get to know who you really are, versus, like, however I perceive you to be, and it goes back to being able to have a open and honest dialogue, but when we're, like, using words that are divisive, and we talked about too, like, creating separate, it's like, yeah, we're here having separate experiences, but we don't have to, like, further separate. We're separating and separating and separating and separating, almost in a fractal way, going the opposite way of, instead of building up, we're tearing down. And that's, to me, that's not loving. That is not loving. And it's just, the more we can tap into the love that we already are, and allow it to flow. And there's a vulnerability piece in there too. And if you've been wounded, and you have unhealed traumas, you're going to want to protect yourself. You're going to just innately, unknowingly, be acting in ways that you're protecting yourself. You're putting your fences up, you're putting your guards up, and judgment can be one of those things. A tool to somehow keep you safe.
Yeah, it absolutely can. But it's, again, the re-examining, right? Re-examining. And I just want to go back to something you said earlier about loving yourself and putting those boundaries in place, and putting protections in place, and even judgments, right? Because as women, this is one that I know personally. As women, we've been taught to be nice no matter what. And how many women die or are abused every single day because they've been taught to be nice. And it's that value piece that's missing for women that allows that to happen. And I'm not saying it happens to every woman, although the numbers are ridiculously high.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know a single woman actually that hasn't had some abuse,
Mm-hmm.
inflicted on her. And because of that niceness of, we have to be that way. And so when you were talking about, you know, loving yourself and judging, or, putting in boundaries, or I forget which word you actually used, but I think that's such an important thing for us to remember, is
Mm-hmm.
that it's not about being kind to everyone regardless,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because loving yourself is that taking care of yourself, putting
Right.
yourself in safe situations, not allowing someone else to harm you because they have more value than you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So important.
Yeah. And I think, bringing me back, it's like, I think I used the word fierce, that love is fierce. And when love yourself to that ferociousness where you are, we also have that, like, I worry about what other people are going to say about me too, in our upbringing too. And that's also of detriment to us, in the keeping ourselves safe, because we all have these little spidey senses, and we have a sense of knowing without knowing why we know. And so we're not overtly, like, walking down the street, you're just getting a vibe. Either you're getting a vibe from a past trauma, if you haven't healed it, or if you've been doing the healing work. What happens when we do the healing work too is we create more space in our body for us to be in there, and our intuition comes online in an even bigger way. And we tend to step out of, like, the protective mechanisms that keep us separate, because that's another problem when we're always living in a protection. Vulnerability is scary, but it's how we feel the world too. And we need to feel the world to get that information. But a lot of us were kind of, gaslit and, whatever. So we don't trust it as much, we trust someone else who knows more. Well, nobody's going to know more than you, right? And information is energy, it's everywhere. And the more you can get in here and to get grounded in love, the more access to that information you'll have, because you start to see yourself as interconnected to that energy. It's information too, when we are still in that separate mindset. That's also, I think, a thing that gives us permission to be mean, because if you would never, well, maybe you would treat yourself like, you treat someone else, but who knows? I mean, if I sometimes see, like, how there's certain people I know that will treat other people really badly. And I wonder, like, what's the inside what's going on the inside,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I truly believe that hurt people hurt people.
Mm.
However, we're all hurt people.
Yeah.
And so we don't have to continue the hurt,
Mm-hmm.
right? We do come, when we lash out at someone, or are violent with someone, or speak badly to someone, it comes from a place of hurt, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But as we do our own healing work, we get to decide when that's released. We get to decide if that's released.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean that it's never going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You might say something you regret. I often say things that I really didn't mean that way, but again, my brain works a little bit differently, and someone else might take it as I
Mm-hmm.
was being mean.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm able to explain myself, then I'm not. They can understand that I was not coming from a place of being mean. And I think that's, again, it's the re-examining, right? Let's have a discussion about this.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that we take things personal too. We take things on a personal level because we don't slow down. We're kind of knee jerk. And you're making me think of an incident in my family recently where, a family member has been, just traditionally known as kind of like a bully. And, all of a sudden they've been probably doing some of their work and they're changing. But because of past behaviors, I'm not really trusting it. And I didn't know what to do. So I like actually just kind of like, I want to give that person a break. Because I want to support their growth and their healing as well. And I also want to keep myself safe. So I kind of sat in like, well, what do I do here? I got into, well, what would be a loving thing to do? Well, a loving thing to do would really to be able to speak my truth about how I really feel about all of this. And what do I really need from this person to be able to move forward? And some of it was just the confession of, because of the way things were, it's not going to be an easy thing for me to let my guard down right away. So I may show up guarded sometimes, but I'm willing to get as open as I can with you. If you're willing to be open with me and let me have those times where I don't feel completely safe around you for whatever the reason. And it was a great dialogue to have, because it allowed this person to step into the changes that they're trying to make or they've been working on making, and also acknowledge that some of their actions created this dynamic between us, and that person's going to need a little time. That person being me is going to need a little time to come into a relationship of trust where trust was broken. So that's kind of how I approach stuff, but it's not always easy to speak my truth, because they may call me a jerk, or he may think I'm a bad person, or they may think this about me or that about me. And I did have those feelings when I was saying what I needed. However, I reframed by allowing myself to walk through it in a different way, in a more loving way. I reframed for myself the fact that I can use my voice and stand up for myself and be fierce for myself, and kind of let go of what the outcome is going to be on that.
Right.
Because I don't know if it's going to be, they're going to get mad at me, or if they're just, I'm not, forget you. I don't know. It's a risk. And I was willing to take that risk for me and for the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. And whenever that happens, whenever there's a situation that happens, or repeated situation sometimes with relationships, it's that absolutely giving yourself the space and allowing your voice, because you are not in charge of the outcome. You're not in charge of changing someone else. You have nothing to do with that. You can only be true to yourself. And that's really the important part, because the more true you are to yourself, the more people will, there's one of two things happen. And I talk about this a lot, is they'll either fall away or they'll change because you've changed. You can never change someone else, but what will happen around you. And I think this is why people often do like the cha-cha in healing work, is because, change is scary, first of all, but also people around them are giving them some pushback. People around them are, either not ready to change, or, whatever the situation, but it's usually people around that cause people to take a step back.
Yeah.
What they think about them, what they say about them, those sort of things. And so being strong enough in yourself is part of that healing journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, totally seeing how strong you actually are, is there's a healing in that as well, it's interesting because it makes me think of the crabs in the bucket. It's like when you change, and we used to tell this to people when, people would come to the clinic, they come for like 2 weeks and they make a tremendous amount of changes. And we'd say, remember, you've been here doing the work and you've created a lot of change. When you go back home, it's still, nothing there has changed. You're going to be very different. And so it may intimidate others if they see you shining and happy and bright, because that means they're going to have to do something. And it's so funny because usually it's looked upon as like, I got to give something up. Right. I gotta give something up. It's like, well, what you're gaining is so much better than whatever that thing you're holding on to. And so sometimes, the pattern is to just drag that person back. We don't like this change. It's too uncomfortable for me, man, so I got to hold it over your head.
And just loving yourself again enough
Mhm.
to understand that, and to know that if they're able, they'll move with you. And if they're not, it's in your best interest that they don't.
Yeah. Yeah. And my first marriage broke up for just that reason. And, it's one of the reasons, I can't say it's all just that, but, one of the things that would happen when I'd go, I started seeing a therapist working on my beliefs and stuff. And, as I was shifting, my energy was shifting and he could feel that. And so it would be like the first couple of months was fine. But once the changes started really becoming exponential, every time I would come home from the therapist, he would start picking a fight and we'd get into it. And I was like, I started to see it like, oh man, this is an interesting pattern, because he sensed it like, ooh, it's so animal, right? There's something different. I gotta fight to shut it down.
Yeah.
It's not even really as conscious as like what we're saying, but those are the drivers, the subconscious drivers. But it just watch people,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
know yeah,
Yeah.
I'd rather fight than switch.
And it's so true. It's so true. We talk about this a lot in my programs, is, it all comes back to awareness. And
Mhm.
so every time we catch ourselves, don't worry about other people. Every time we
Right.
catch ourselves, it's what are we going to do about what we're doing? Right? Keep
Yeah.
moving in this direction because we're moving in a strong direction. Stop ourselves because it's like, okay, this is, we don't like for our own selves what's happening. Or is it, okay, I recognize what's happening, but I'm just not in a place right now where I can do anything about it. I'm going to come back to this. Whatever it is, that awareness is ultimately what's going to make the changes for you.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yeah. And, as you're speaking, it's like change occurs like one person at a time. And if you're willing to step into your power and be the love and light you want to see in the world, and you start allowing yourself to be that, it'll be amazing what you will create in your life, because you'll start shifting your own energy and things will just appear. You'll meet the right people. Like if you're, because we all have that thing, we want to do something to help. We got to help save this problem or solve this problem. And you'll be amazed that when you start coming here, what starts showing up for you for opportunities that really get you to that place that you're longing to be, which is being of service, not slave, but being of service to the transformation that's happening right now. Yeah.
And that was going to be my final question, was what's something we as individuals can do to
Yeah.
move from a place of love?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
well, thank you. You and I can talk for hours. We know this, we do it.
True. True. This is a juicy topic too.
It
Yeah.
is.
I'm just like holding the vision for all of us to be in love with ourselves to the point that it just starts getting organically reflected into all that we say, do, and be. And that's the vision I hold for us as a people on this planet.
I love that. I love that. Well,
Mm,
thank you so much for being here today.
you are so welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for watching this interview. This interview was part of our Healing with Love Summit, which includes healing practices with each interview. If you're interested in learning more or purchasing the full summit with interviews and healing exercises, click the link below. Remember that it is a choice how we move through this world. Choose love. Love heals.